What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse, back from vacation. I know Austin and Josh held it down last week. Their guest pulled out at the last moment and they were still able to make everything work. So with me, as always, my co-host, Austin Amandolia. Austin, thanks for filling in last week. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing great. I'm excited to draft this morning, and we just have really dedicated mock drafters for this show. Like the shows have been filling up so quick this year, and I forgot to mention last week there was like legit smack talk happening in the chat of our mock draft. So I love it. We've got some dedicated followers, and I'm excited for this morning.
So I had this bright idea early into this season, and speaking of dedicated people, just say good morning to Cole World. What's up, buddy? But I had this idea that you can friend request people on the Sleeper app. And so I just friend request the people who join our drafts to begin with, and then they get the first invites. So by making sure that they get that, and then these are the people who already draft with us, it just kind of worked out really quickly because I agree. These drafts are filled up a half an hour after I send the invites out. So it's working out really well. We are back into Dynasty this week, and we're probably going to be on Dynasty literally until end of May, and we'll start working some best ball and everything in. But it's Dynasty time of year. We don't need to be talking redraft. And when I think Dynasty, I love what the guys over at Destination Devy are doing. And one of the first people we ever got to talk with from that site and from everything is Iowa Mike. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. What's this, my fourth appearance here on Club Fantasy?
Well, the first time I met you was on the mock draft show. Right. I put out my my bat signal last year of people who are available at 11 o'clock in the morning, and you were one of the first ones to get a hold of me. So we got you on there. And then I know you and Josh have linked up quite well, and we've had you on our regular Wednesday show as well.
So let's go, man. It's like a monthly appearance, man. I think I'm contractually obligated to make a monthly appearance here. So
there you go.
I'm excited, man. I love doing mock drafts. I love doing Dynasty stuff. So anytime you can put me on and I get to bullshit about how great I am at mock drafting,
I love it.
It's a good time.
Well, I agree, and I always love being the best mock drafter, which is why I had to take myself out of these mock drafts just so I could host, because it would just be my team being the best team every night. No, I'm joking. Michael, before we get started, Michael, tell people what you work on, where they can find your work, everything about you, and then we'll get started with this draft.
So we started out, we still do a podcast at Destination Devy for Ray. Ray's incredible. That comes out every Friday, so you can just check that out wherever you get your podcasts. And then big thing for us, we started our own YouTube page, and we just keep growing it and doing AMAs and doing all kinds of crazy stuff over there. My man Adam, the guy that I work with, my best friend in the entire world, who I met on Destination Devy Discord, believe it or not. Now we've grown that into something it's its own animal. So you can go check out our YouTube page, South Harmon Fantasy Football, and that's where you can find most of the stuff that we're doing.
And I saw you still had your Patreon link. I'm going to make sure we get that in the description of this video as well, because I know you guys are putting out great content over there.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, so we're going to get to Josh's breaking news here in a second, but first I'm going to get the draft up. So a couple quick things. This is a Dynasty startup. This is a Superflex draft, so you're going to see quarterbacks go early. As always, we only have about an hour to get this show in, so this will only be a 15-round draft. I did not tell Austin and Michael I was going to do this ahead of time, but around pick 14, I'm going to put you guys on the spot about players you are shocked that are still available. And what I mean by that is round 14. So I'll put you guys on the spot around that time, as long as I remember to do it and nothing else comes up. So first thing I'm going to do is get the draft started. And then after we get the draft started, we'll pop Josh's breaking news up. I had a whole great idea to start the show, but Josh is going to go ahead and interrupt that right away. And breaking news as I cover Austin's face up. Jalen Hurts signs a 5-year extension with the Philadelphia Eagles. He is now the highest paid quarterback in history. I have no idea what the details of the deal are. I'm sure Josh will drop it in the chat. But Austin, how do you feel about Hurts getting the bag?
I mean, he deserved it. The way he played last year, he played at an MVP level. I think without him getting injured, there would have been an actual conversation between him and Patrick Mahomes of who deserved the MVP, and just missing those few games, I think, is what primarily hurt his chances. So yeah, I think he deserves it, and much better investment, in my opinion, than the investment some other teams have made in their quarterbacks this offseason. Like, I would rather pay Jalen Hurts than I would Daniel Jones. So shout out to the Eagles for landing their franchise quarterback. Last year was a prove-it year for him, and I think he did it and deserves this extension.
So I was going to bring this up to you, Mike. Have we seen really a transition like we've seen from Hurts over the last 2 years, that literally last year the talk was, are the Eagles prepping for the future? Are they going to keep him on a short leash? Yada, yada, yada. And now he's getting $255 million with, did Josh literally go to 3 decimal points on the guaranteed money? 179,304,000 guaranteed. And the
Look,
first
he's
ever,
happy.
yeah, no shit.
He's got to show off a little bit.
But Mike, have we seen a transition of a quarterback on the shortest leash possible to now a quarterback on the longest leash possible in fantasy football and in football in general?
I think we have, right? We had the Josh Allen situation. I just flashed back to a couple years ago where I'm sitting in an actual dynasty startup and I'm going, who do I take, Josh Allen or Carson Wentz? And this is Carson Wentz coming off an ACL injury.
Okay.
And you're going, oh my gosh, this is a choice. And then flash forward, Josh Allen completely changes his mechanics, changes his accuracy, goes on to now he's in the conversation as the best quarterback in the NFL, along with Patrick Mahomes, along with Jalen Hurts, along with Joe Burrow and these guys. You kind of seeing the same thing. Like, I was a big detractor of Jalen Hurts. I'm a huge Eagles fan, but I was a big detractor of Jalen Hurts even heading into last year. He turned the whole thing around from his accuracy standpoint, his decision-making in the pocket. One of the things that I always knocked him for is he was just too early to escape the pocket, didn't trust his protection. We have a fantastic offensive line in Philadelphia, and he would always try to run out of the pocket immediately. And he started to change his game last year. And you saw it where Austin was just talking about, if he doesn't miss those handful of games, like, he is legitimately probably walking away with the MVP last year.
Yeah.
Even though Patrick Mahomes was fantastic, Jalen Hurts is probably walking away with that award. So
yeah, and
very well-deserved contract for him.
I'm saying you can make the argument, and we've kind of alluded to this last year, was him missing the games and the Eagles losing both, at least one, if not both of those games. Does that not strengthen his MVP case? Like, it's just super interesting to me that we saw a situation where him missing the games probably should have made the case stronger. Right. But I think Patrick Mahomes' first kind of rodeo without Travis Kelce, I think, kind of cemented himself into that position with the MVP there. So the first round goes precisely how the first rounds have tend to go. Austin, I love you for the Travis Kelce pick. We'll get to that in a moment. I was going to start with my first basic question of, is Justin Jefferson the guy who should be the first non-quarterback taken? And we're going to get back to that because it's a super flex draft, so you need to talk about quarterbacks. But Mike made a joke before the show, which honestly is probably 100% true. So a little behind the scenes acting for everybody here. Almost every question I end up coming up with on this show tends to revolve around what's going on with my fantasy team. And a few weeks ago, Bijan Robinson was the second running back taken. And Austin, you just made him the first running back taken. And we'll talk more about your pick at the end of the show. But my question about Bijan Robinson in general, and I'm going to let both of you guys answer. Austin, you've already answered it once, but Mike, you're going to answer it first. For a team that is absolute trash, pretty well set up at the quarterback position, but absolute trash at every other position, and you have the 101, should Bijan Robinson be your pick when you're probably 3 years away from competing? Or do you sell Bijan Robinson? Do you draft him and sell Bijan Robinson? Do you trade the 101 before the draft? I guess, what is the way your strategy in that situation, the way you would handle it if you had the 101 in just an awful super flex team?
I feel like Adam and I have debated this ad nauseum back and forth, and we're kind of both on different sides of the coin. He's definitely on the coin of, maybe he doesn't take Bijan, maybe he takes a quarterback instead.
Okay.
And I've told him that I just can't do it. Obviously, if my team's not ready, I'd like to trade the pick, but those offers may not be there. And let's say you do get to draft it and nobody has offered you a package worth what Bijan Robinson is currently worth. I'm going ahead and I'm drafting him, period. I'll take him. And it is April. We're going to be doing a lot of rookie drafts in May. Maybe some people do them in June. The football season doesn't start till September. So you'll be fine. Like, you have plenty of time for Bijan Robinson to do something in training camp or in the preseason games, to do something where somebody goes, man, I really have to get him. Like, my team is in the position. Let me go make Ryan an offer for Bijan Robinson that's actually, right up there with what he's worth. So I don't think I think sometimes people overthink it where they go, hey, my team's not ready for Bijan. I can't take him. And then I have to take a quarterback, or I have to take an offer that's junk and it's not really up to the level of Bijan. I think people just need to relax. It's May, it's April right now. Just take your time. Don't overthink it. Take the best player, figure it out how you want to build your dynasty team in the next couple of months. Like, there's a long time to where actually putting points on the board. So don't feel like you need to be rushed right now.
And Austin, that kind of echoes the advice we've heard throughout our time doing this show. We're about a month in at this point, is you want to take players that aren't going to lose value. And so I think that's kind of a great way of putting what Mike just said. And now you obviously made Bijan the first running back taken. So I guess talk to me a little bit about, put yourself in my situation, an awful team, but unlike what Mike was saying, I don't really need quarterback. So the decision for me isn't quarterback. It's either Bijan or trade the pick, because I'm certainly not going to take JSN or anybody like that with the 101. So we'll put yourself in my situation. And obviously, like I said, you just made Bijan the very first pick. So
yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on what the trade package is to me. So a trade scenario I could see being valid here is trade the 101 for 3 first-round picks. With this class, I'm not willing to do that because there's a nice drop off, in my opinion, midway through the first round of rookie drafts. So if I'm trading the 101, I'm trading for a veteran player that is going to be elite for years to come. Like, I'm trading for, if I can get like a Jamar Chase for the 101, like if somebody's just that excited about Bijan, like I would do something like that where this is a clear stud player. But otherwise, I agree. I'm taking Bijan Robinson because I think he's going to be a stud running back for at least the next 3 to 5 years. And as you're trying to build your roster over the next several years, he's going to be a great foundational piece that holds down the fort. I do think he has a compelling case for the number 1 running back in dynasty formats right now because he's going to be the youngest and he hasn't played it down, but he has shown through his college tape and through just the overall well-rounded skills that he has the potential to be an elite running back. He's going to be on the field nonstop. He can run between the tackles. He can catch the ball. He can line up as a receiver in the slot. Like, he can do all the things that you need in an elite fantasy running back.
Is there a landing spot where you wouldn't feel that strongly about him? One team that we've heard him rumored to, which would break my heart, is apparently the New England Patriots are very, very interested in Bijan Robinson. You have the double knock on the New England Patriots. One, you have Ramondre Stevenson, who had a breakout year last year. And 2, they like to use multiple quarterbacks. Well, they have done that as well, but multiple running backs, more importantly. So would Bijan Robinson splitting time with a Ramondre Stevenson bother you at all, Austin? If he were on the New England Patriots right now, would he still have been your first running back off the board?
I think so, because I'm going to go with the talent there. And I think that the value of his touches will just be huge no matter what. I think one of the things when looking at running backs in a committee is like, and sometimes it makes them better because they're not having to do those 30 touches. And so there's more burst whenever they do touch the ball. So I think the value is still going to be there. I mean, like, another running back in a similar situation that's still getting drafted high is frankly Christian McCaffrey. Like, when Elijah Mitchell is healthy, Christian McCaffrey's not having as many 20-point games, but he's still Christian McCaffrey. So you're still going to take him pretty early in these drafts because of the upside that's there.
Speaking of Christian McCaffrey, our buddy Michael Sicoli, the 10th pick. He didn't know how he got put on auto draft. And then I think he took Christian McCaffrey. Actually, I don't think he did. And then he just got auto drafted again. So Michael just having an awful time at the 10th pick right now. All right. Okay. So one of my favorite things to talk about in Superflex drafts, Mike, is, and you fell perfectly by taking the 109 here, is when should people consider not going quarterback? And is Justin Jefferson definitely the pick if you're not going to go quarterback? So my question to you is, Justin Jefferson went 1 pick before you. Lamar Jackson fell to you. And Lamar Jackson's an interesting case right now because the talent is certainly there, but people seem a little leery of him. If the role was reversed and Lamar Jackson went at the 08, would you have taken Jefferson or would you have still stuck quarterback at that situation?
I was definitely worried about that. Like,
Okay.
am I going to come on the mock draft show as the guy who like hates wide receivers, especially we're doing a half PPR one, and going to be the guy who takes the first wide receiver? I was panicked about that, not going to lie. So it was nice that Lamar just one more.
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely flipped exactly how you needed it to.
I think in half PPR, I'd sit here if I was actually in the draft and this was for real money and I'm going, man, Justin Jefferson, or I think I'd probably go Deshaun Watson, to be honest. I think I still pass one more time. But then say you're sitting at the 110, it's like you have to take Justin Jefferson. I think you can make a case for maybe taking like Bijan or Travis Kelce, but it doesn't feel good to take Dak Prescott at the 110. It doesn't feel good to take Kyler or Tua or whoever that is at the 110 with those other guys staring you in the face. So,
and Dynasty makes it a little bit more interesting, but that was a revelation I had in Scott Fishbowl last year. Scott Fishbowl is a 2-quarterback draft, but the quality of your quarterback matters. And what I basically found myself was what I had a pick at the end of the draft. And I did take Dak Prescott, and worse yet, I took Dak Prescott over Travis Kelce, which is the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs because Prescott missed games last year. And so it's a very interesting point that you bring up is, yes, quarterbacks are important, but there comes a point where the talent of what's out there for you is more important. So you're saying for yourself, it's 110 is kind of the break point where if all these quarterbacks were gone, that's when you would be open to taking Justin.
It really feels like once you get to the Deshaun Watson range, like that one is probably 50-50 for me. But after that, it just feels like you're chasing everybody else, right? You're chasing the guys who have Mahomes and Allen and Hurts and Burrow, and you're trying to chase them with Dak. You're trying to chase them with a quarterback who's very tiny and has one good knee at this point. Like that's not a great feeling. That's not a great feeling to be on the chasing end of the Superflex run. So you might as well just start your own run. You might as well start you have the best receiver, you have the best tight end, you have the best running back, whatever it may be.
Speaking of the run, and Josh kind of alluded to this into the comments, Austin, starting with the 2-5, 2-6, 2-7, we had the 3 rookie quarterbacks go in a row: Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. My first big issue is that Richardson went ahead of Stroud, so I'll let you guys both comment on that. But Austin, how do you feel about them going where they did in the order they did?
Yeah, I think the order is very interesting here. I definitely want to talk about that, where they're going. It depends on your roster build. I think for Jacob Lundy and Nicky B tied, like they had quarterbacks already, and so taking that second quarterback and it being that rookie, I feel more comfortable with that. For B Brendan, Bryce Young being your first quarterback, I feel a little less comfortable with that. I mean, with it being Bryce Young, I think it's okay. If he had taken Anthony Richardson, we would have had a larger conversation, but I think that's about right. But at this point, it's all about the projection. I think there are some quarterbacks on the board still that are a little bit more valuable at this point and that we know what they are. So I might have went ahead and taken a receiver or a running back, but since it's super flex, like some folks just want to go ahead and lock down that quarterback position right away. And I totally get that. Anthony Richardson ahead of CJ Stroud, that's a bold move. And I think like if you're just willing to take that projection and say that the ceiling for Richardson is so much higher, like I get it. I see the potential there. The issue is like you're not competing in 2023. You're by taking Anthony Richardson, you're saying 2024 is my year because he's probably going to sit most of this year. Whereas CJ Stroud is more likely to be starting this year and is probably going to be a solid quarterback out the gate just because of the skill set that he has.
Mike, continue that conversation, but I'm going to throw in just an extra piece to you. All 3 of those guys going 4 picks ahead of Kyler Murray. How do we feel about that situation?
That was probably the craziest part. Like I just talk trash about Kyler, but I'm still not taking any of these rookie quarterbacks over Kyler. None, not a single one of them. So I know I just talked about how bad. Oh, he's tiny. He's got one knee. He's got all the issues going on. But come on, man. Like I can't take those guys over Kyler. Kyler's actually shown it, so he would have been the pick for me. I debated taking him over Tua, but I'm a Tua guy. I just got off a Dolphins fan cruise, so if I don't take Tua Tagovailoa in the second round, I think I'm going to have some Dolphins legends coming to find me.
Yeah, or the Europeans will find you.
Or the Europeans will find me. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would even extend that to Daniel Jones. Like, maybe from an NFL perspective, like he's not the sexiest quarterback out there, but from a fantasy perspective, he's solid. And so I would rather take him ahead of the 3 rookies at this point. I might even take him ahead of Kyler personally, because I do worry about Kyler's injury history. But yeah, I agree with what Mike is saying. Taking those rookies ahead of Kyler Murray for sure is a little bit hard for me, but hey, if you're wanting to start out just as young as you can possibly be, that's a solid strategy to take.
Also, I'm going to keep going with you here. One pick that I found interesting, just kind of looking, is Jonathan Taylor last year was the guy who you flirted with in a Superflex draft of taking instead of a quarterback. He was Justin Jefferson last year, for right or for wrong. And one bad year has dropped him into the 3rd pick of the 3rd round in a dynasty draft and as the 4th running back. We've talked a lot about Bijan, but you kind of brought up, Christian McCaffrey, while an absolute beast when he plays football, there are red flags there, not terribly red flags, maybe pink flags, but there are definitely red flags there. And Breece Hall is also coming off of an injury. Should these guys still be going ahead of Jonathan Taylor, or is Jonathan Taylor becoming a value in dynasty right now, Austin?
I think because of the upside, like Jonathan Taylor, if he's not going as the first non-quarterback, he's going to always be a value because he has that upside to just be the number 1 non-quarterback in any format. And I think definitely in terms of running backs right now, he has an ability to be a value play. He missed time last year, but when he started playing towards the end of the season, he was performing really well. And I think to your point, Ryan, like Breece Hall coming off an injury, he's probably going to have a slow start this year. So, I think that's a long-term play, but Jonathan Taylor, he can make you more competitive in this upcoming season. I think in general, what you're seeing too is a shift away from valuing running backs as much to valuing receivers more. Like we've seen this year more so than last year, like people being willing to take receivers at the 1, 2, 3 spot outside of quarterback. Whereas before it's typically been, if you're not taking a quarterback, you're taking a running back. So yeah. I think we're just seeing a change in philosophy as well. And that's contributing to Jonathan Taylor falling down the queue a little bit more.
Yeah. Mike, just continue with that. What are your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor? Like, obviously the Colts are a rough team to believe in right now. But they've been kind of bad at quarterback, and we still saw Taylor look really good for a year.
It's crazy to think, man. We're doing a half PPR mock draft, and people still hate running backs.
Yeah.
The shift has been that much. Half PPR, the one where running backs should be elevated, should be pushed up. And yet I'm here, the running back guy, about to take my 3rd wide receiver in a row. Still passing on running backs because no one cares. You got Saquon Barkley in the 4th round. Not just Jonathan Taylor, but Saquon in the 4th round. Like, what's going on? Nobody wants running backs. So if you're actually in a startup draft, like you need to process this information. Will they be values? Yes. Can you get JT in the 3rd and Saquon in the 4th? 100%. But you also need to think about, like, these are guys that you're going to have on your team that 11 other managers in your league told you, I don't want. Like, I don't have interest in it. I'd rather take wide receiver 15 than RB5. And you need to internalize that and go, when I draft these guys, they're probably going to die on my rosters. Like, they're probably going to finish out their careers here or on the waiver wire on my team. So it's crazy. I'm sitting here. I still don't want a running back. I don't want a running back. They're horrible. We're going to take another wide receiver. Why not?
See that, and that's funny because I'm going to be interested to see how much this carries over into redraft, because in Dynasty, you tend to lend yourself to wide receivers because the going, notion is that they have a longer shelf life. But then at some point you also need to win the first championship. Someone has to win the first championship. And so, like, getting these running backs is going to help you, but you hit a really good point that they're going to die on your roster. And that's something I want to talk about with Austin's Travis Kelce pick, but I'm going to save that for a little bit later in the draft. Is that eventually the value outweighs where they're falling in the draft. But I wanted to actually, I break all my rules when it comes to, I usually like to let you guys talk about your teams at the end. But Michael, I found it interesting that you are kind of taking the value of the older player, if you will, as it falls to you. Because we saw, T. Higgins and Chris Olave is obviously a great young quarterback, but our wide receiver, those guys went ahead of Stephon Diggs and it fell to you. And then all the way on the comeback, Cooper Kupp falling to Austin, which is pretty amazing. Devontae Adams, but then you get DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is 2 years removed from people calling him the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. So for someone like yourself who hates wide receivers, but this value keeps falling to you, does it become a point where you don't care about their age? Are you looking to win in year 1?
I think the biggest shift for me has been not just this mock draft, but just in general, how I rank wide receivers too, has been like, I really don't care as much about their age anymore. If you're going to produce, you're going to produce. So if you look at a guy like Stephon Diggs, for example, because I just took him in this draft, but also you can include like Tyreek Hill. Both are guys that put up elite fantasy numbers year in and year out, but they're also reaching that point where we start to hate them because they're 30, right? They're about to turn 30. It's all over for them. I look at those guys and I'm just trying to judge them in 2-3 year windows tops. And I'm just thinking, can Tyreek Hill reasonably be a top 5, a top 7, a top 8, top 9 wide receiver for another 2 years? And for me, the answer is yes. And if the answer is yes, then I need to rank them appropriately and stop thinking about, I love Chris Olave. I love the fact that he put up great numbers as a rookie, but stop valuing the youth part so much over the actual production, at least at the wide receiver position where it doesn't really seem to matter as much. If the guy's 33, it's a different story, right? If it's Julio Jones, like we know you get into the end of your career, we knew that was a suspect thing. But Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, like these kind of wide receivers, I'm not going to put as much emphasis on the age thing. Just because they're 29 and a half shouldn't scare me off for the fact that the next 2 years they're going to be awesome wide receivers on my team. And whether or not I think they're awesome or not, when they're out there scoring 20 points per game, and my league mates see them, they're going to want them on their team at the same time. So it's not that big of a deal for me. So Stephon Diggs easily. The DK Metcalf thing was pretty awesome too, just because I don't understand why he's fallen so much, like why you're getting him in the 4th round when this guy literally, like you said, a couple of years ago, we're talking about, hey, he's the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. And it's not like he's been bad since then. It's just other people have kind of emerged.
So there are 2 players I want you to talk about, Austin. 2 last year rookie wide receivers that had turbulent rookie years, one expected, one not so expected, that went way earlier than what I expected in this draft. We had Stacey Perez take Treylon Burks with the 4-10, and then our buddy Kevin turn around and take Jameson Williams with the 6-11. And these are 2 highly touted first-round wide receivers from last year that are in turbulent situations. Tennessee is an absolute mess, and we don't 100% know what's going on with Jameson Williams yet. So is this too early to start jumping on last year's rookie wide receivers? Obviously not the Olaves and Garrett Wilsons, but there are more questions when it comes to Burks and Jameson Williams.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a little bit on your roster build. So like Treylon Burks, I don't want him to be my wide receiver 1 right now. But with Stacey having Garrett Wilson already there, I'm like, yeah, go for Treylon Burks. I love Treylon Burks. And I think the situation in Tennessee is going to be just fine for him to be able to produce in year 2. And with the rest of her roster build, I think it's going to be just fine, particularly locking it down with Jalen Hurts and TJ Hockenson. Like the positional value that is there already warrants taking a leap on some of these other receivers. Particularly, like there is a bit of a tier jump happening when you get in that Treylon Burks range. So I'm willing to take that extra jump. Jameson Williams, I have more questions about because we just have such little data on what it's going to be like. And when you have other players out there like Terry McLaurin, who we've seen his upside, Deontay Johnson, who is perennially just a consistent wide receiver 2, even in years where he doesn't score touchdowns, like he is a consistent target threat. Like I'm a little bit less excited about taking the leap on Jameson Williams, particularly because he seems more like potentially a boom or bust player. But again, Kevin had Jalen Waddle already on his team.
Yeah.
So like, and he's got Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and Trey Lance. So like, he's not worried about the quarterback position. Ramondre Stevenson and J.K. Dobbins are great. So having kind of a dart throw on that wide receiver too, I get it for the Rochester build. Maybe not where I would take Jameson Williams, but if it makes sense within the context of your team, I'm willing to buy into it.
Michael, along that same thought, what about Jahan Dotson? It seems like, and I know the rule of fantasy football is you don't talk about players who haven't been drafted yet, but that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here is Jahan Dotson had a better rookie year, I think, than Burks and certainly Williams. He was kind of the surprise first round pick, but I think he was the 11th or 14th or very early teens overall by the Washington Commanders. Is he a value when you're looking at what these players are, or are these guys just flat out being overdrafted?
He was a value last year, but the community as a whole kind of caught up to him. And I think it's kind of like George Pickens, again, like talking about guys who just went. They kind of just got pushed up a little bit too high for what they're actually producing. And it kind of gets outside the range for me anyways of guys I think are values. Like I think they're appropriately valued. Where George Pickens just went at 7-12, Jahan Dotson won't be too far behind. There's other wide receivers that are producing more. They just don't have the youth that I think people should be focused on. But they were good. They're good. The Treylon Burks thing I don't know if I have the stones to take Treylon Burks that early. Like I don't.
Fourth round, my eyes bulged out of my head. I'm not going
right.
to.
I don't have the stones to do it. I mean, especially when I get Michael Pittman in the 5th, not to like toot my own horn, but I think Michael Pittman has produced far more than Treylon Burks has even sniffed at this point, right? Like Michael Pittman does it in 5 games what Treylon does in an entire season.
I don't mean to just call everybody out on the show, but Christian Watson going the pick before Michael Pittman and ahead of DJ Moore and Jerry. Like, I wonder if because it's a mock, obviously people get a little bit more loose, but I just wonder if we're just valuing, and this seems to be the theme of today's show, are we valuing youth just a little bit too much? Because you kind of said something really interesting about the running backs is that, especially when you get to the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, the 12 under managers in your league have told you they don't want this guy. So now if Jameson Williams isn't the next Tyreek Hill, if Treylon Burks isn't the next AJ Brown, you just took a 4th round pick in a startup for a guy who you're not going to be able to move for anything remotely close to that value.
Yeah, I think too. Yeah,
go ahead, Austin.
Oh, sorry about that. I think part of what we're seeing too is just like some of these players are really polarizing. Like Christian Watson, like I think there are people that are way higher on him and think he's the second coming, whereas I'm kind of like, I'm not sure I see it long term. I mean, he had some ceiling games and he had like 4 touchdowns in 2 games. I'm just like that's not sustainable. So I don't really see the upside there. And I think part of it's just like when you play with different people, there's a wide range of outcomes that people see for these players. And I think one thing that would be interesting to me is to not just see the ADP numbers on some players, but the min and max of where they have been drafted in leagues to understand like what is the variance on how people value these players. Like a good example of this is Isaiah Pacheco going in the 8th round. I've seen him go in like the 6th round in drafts because people just think that, oh, he's about to be that workhorse running back in an elite offense. And so they're like buying in on Isaiah Pacheco. But I think this is more appropriate where it's like, yeah, I mean, he's probably a good running back too, or flex play. So I think it's just the fantasy community, I think, has a very wide range of opinions on specific players. And I think like Christian Watson is the prime example of that.
I'm not shaking my head at your answer. Joe Zolo is just lighting up the YouTube chat. So we're going to start with Treylon Burks better than Justin Jefferson.
Stop.
For the very specific reason that Justin Jefferson doesn't hunt hogs with his bare hands.
I mean, he's not wrong there.
Yeah, so that was the story that came out. That was one of our favorite moments with Britt Flynn from last year. Britt Flynn, a big Treylon Burks guy.
I would invite Joe to the Mock It Like It's Hot show just so he can take Treylon Burks at the 1-on-1 and just like, let's put that into the universe.
Joe has to have some Monday morning available out there in North Dakota. Come on, buddy, get on the show. But we're also going to throw in his eternal hatred of Alvin Kamara. He's gearing up for an elite season from the prison team. Wow. I'm going to take that Alvin Kamara and generalize it a little bit more, make it slightly more PC and available for our audience. Kamara and Joe Mixon have some red flags off the field, but these are guys who have proven themselves to be top 5 running backs. Michael, as a guy who you mentioned yourself is not big on wide receivers in general, how do you weigh a player like Alvin Kamara, like Joe Mixon, like even, I don't want to lump him in with this, but Dalvin Cook, who could be cut in the coming days? How are you weighing that when it comes to a startup draft, because you're making such an investment in these players?
I think right now where you're starting to see those guys go, especially in this one and a half PPR, is the perfect spot, like the 8th, 9th, 10th round, because the risk is already baked into them for various reasons. One, Dalvin Cook, we've known for a while that when he's healthy, he's fantastic, but the health thing has always been an issue with him. Alvin Kamara has the off the field stuff. Joe Mixon, he does have some, I guess, if you want to call it off the field stuff. I think a lot of that was just kind of overblown. But Joe Mixon, his problem was Cincinnati just didn't give him the workload, right? How much Samaje Perine did we see down the stretch last year? And Joe Mixon actually kind of looked cooked. But for running backs that have historically produced, like if Zeke Elliott was still on the Dallas Cowboys, he'd be in this conversation too. He'd be 100%. That kind of guy where you go in like the 8th, 9th, 10th round, 11th round. I'm just going to take the guy who maybe has those 4 or 5 weeks where they hit you 20 fantasy points. Maybe they still have a little juice left in the tank. Maybe they're good enough to be an RB2 for a while. Those are the kind of running backs that I'm interested in. The fact that like Derrick Henry's down here in the 7th round is kind of disrespectful next to Dalvin Cook, because these guys aren't in the same class. Like Derrick Henry just walks into 1,400 rushing yards every single year, but he should not be in the same classification as these other guys. So seeing them right next to each other like hurts my soul on a deeper level.
Well, and let's throw out there, first and foremost, I want to go back to my little starred question here. Our buddy from the chat, Cole World, is the TDE drafter as well. So he was defending his Anthony Richardson pick, saying it was a ceiling play. To see Derrick Henry go at essentially the exact same spot as Zach Charbonnet, who does not have a team right now and is no guarantee to even be a 2nd round pick in the upcoming draft, is a very, obviously we questioned his Anthony Richardson pick, but then we're loving the Derrick Henry pick, and then the comeback is Zach Charbonnet. It's just so weird to see Henry lumped in with these guys when he had the 8-game season a few years ago, or 2 years ago, last year, whatever. But he was still the RB5, like when he stopped playing that year and then came back and had another great year last year, Austin. So to Mike's point, what is the hell is going on with Derrick Henry in startup drafts right now?
I think it's just the theme of this show is that people are scared off by age. There's another running back that I am eyeballing right now that I'm like, how the heck is he still available? And I'm curious to see if he falls to me.
How much further he falls?
I think like people click on the Derrick Henry name and they see age 29 and they're like scared off by that, which I get. But to your point about Derrick Henry going right next to Zach Charbonnet, like I think that it actually makes sense to me, because I'm like, okay, you took an older running back who has like 2 or 3 years probably left of elite production, and then you took a young running back that could just waltz right into being a new RB1 in 2 or 3 years when Derrick Henry inevitably finishes his career, starts to decline. So I kind of dig that roster build, and I think
I'm going to throw one quick thing in since you're talking about his roster build. I didn't even notice it was his comment that his plan in this mock draft. I love shit like this. People who take mock drafts to the next level. He's just going to trade Derrick Henry to a contender.
And I think this is a really good point about taking age even when these guys are falling, because I mean, like Cooper Kupp is a great example. Let's say my team is just, I'm week 5 or 6 and I'm like 1-5. I'm probably going to be like, okay, you know what? Didn't work out. This roster's not going to cut it. So I'm going to pick a good time where Cooper Kupp has really outperformed and has been doing Cooper Kupp things, and see, is there another team out there that's willing to take the leap and go get Cooper Kupp to try and contend for a playoff run or a championship. So, it's Dynasty is all about timing. It's about figuring out when to deal the players that other people are going to value more than you and to acquire that future capital. And it's about the timing of when do I just put all of my chips in and say, I'm going to compete right now.
You're about to, speaking of timing, you're about to time out. But
Yeah.
I'm going to bring us over to the first drafter here with us, Raising Zabar. Starts off the draft with Patrick Mahomes. I think pretty universally the 101 at quarterback, maybe Josh Allen, but I think it's one of those two. I find it interesting that he held off on quarterback for so long, Michael, and then takes Aaron Rodgers. Was this him just waiting too long? Because right now, we don't even know what the hell's happening with Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
But I think we can assume he's the starter for either the Packers or the Jets. I think it's probably one of those two. But is Aaron Rodgers even a guy we should be considering as a QB2 in Dynasty still?
I mean, when you start out with Patrick Mahomes, you have a lot of leeway to do whatever
Okay.
you want with your dynasty rosters. Like that's probably the best chip to have where you can just figure out what you want to do. I mean, think about it though. Aaron Rodgers, right around the range that Geno's going, Jordan Love, Matt Stafford, Derek Carr. Like that's fair. Is Aaron Rodgers playing this year? Yes. Like I can say he's going to play football this year. After this year, we don't know what he's going to do. Yeah. I think you just play him out year to year. But in the 7th round for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, whether it's for the Packers, whether it's for another team, whether he moves on to the Jets, doesn't really matter. You're getting a quarterback in Superflex in the 7th round who historically has been very efficient and can put up decent fantasy points. Like Aaron Rodgers is a fine QB2, albeit on the low end. But when you start with Patrick Mahomes, you can pretty much wait as long as you want for your second quarterback. Just get somebody with a pulse who's going to take some snaps. That's really all you need.
Austin, is Aaron Rodgers the better pick than Geno Smith 2 picks later?
I think it depends a little bit on like where you see your team at the point in the draft. So for me, looking at Raising Zabar, I might rather take Geno Smith because I'm not certain this team is competing this year. And if I'm taking Aaron Rodgers, I want a team that I think can win in 2023. Whereas Geno Smith, I'm like, okay, you got 3 or 4 years potentially, maybe 2 years, at least 2 years. So you can kind of compete in 24, 25. But
I'm going to stop you and put you on the spot. So Breece Hall, Austin Eckler, the wide receivers are questionable. Kyle Pitts is a starting fantasy tight end. And then Patrick Mahomes, you really don't see this as a competing team? And is it Aaron Rodgers and the wide receivers that are really just drawing you away?
I think it's the receivers and it's the question marks with with Breece Hall and Kyle Pitts to me. Because Breece Hall, he's coming off of ACL. We've seen time and time again when players return from ACL injuries, it just takes time for them to get back to that elite performance. And so I think Breece Hall, and I think he's going to be an interesting topic during redraft season because the first half of the season, he might not be an elite running back for fantasy managers, but he might get drafted as one. Kyle Pitts, I'm not really sure what Arthur Smith is going to do with this Falcons team. I'm hoping that him trading for Jonnu Smith means that Kyle Pitts is done being an inline tight end and that he just goes and lines up in the slot all day and that Desmond Ridder can actually throw the ball. But I do think the fantasy performance of Kyle Pitts makes this I guess this is his 3rd year now, a bit of a question mark to me of where he's going to be in 2023. I think for Dynasty, like I'm okay with taking Kyle Pitts here because I think beyond this season, he's going to be an elite tight end. But if you're trying to compete now, I have some questions about Kyle Pitts as my tight end 1.
Yeah, I'm just going to have Mike continue with that because I think Pitts is such an interesting character because I'm actually in the middle of writing a tight end article right now. And my opening line to Kyle Pitts was that he was born into Dynasty royalty, but what has he earned? And so, Michael, Kyle Pitts, 3-1, the 2nd tight end taken in this draft. What is your take on Kyle Pitts? Is there going to be this click of a unlock moment or are we going to, is he, putting it bluntly, is he a Jag? Is he just a guy? Is he Evan Ingram?
I mean, it's really hard to say that the guy is just a guy when he comes out his rookie year and does something that we've rarely ever seen from a rookie tight end, go over 1,000 yards receiving, which is actually pretty impressive for him. Last year, I know it was bad, but the offense as a whole was bad. The quarterback play is abysmal. Like it's weird to say that a guy who went to Indianapolis and Matt Ryan and played so bad and how much we just hated Matt Ryan there actually made Kyle Pitts relevant the year before and that he was an upgrade over what kind of QB play that they had last year. I will say this with Kyle Pitts, Adam just did a wonderful TikTok that put me back in on Kyle Pitts where he's talking about all the metrics that Kyle Pitts hit last year that are actually pretty impressive. Like if you look at his unrealized air yards, like leading the entire league from a tight end position, just the fact that they couldn't get him the football. So he's out there running routes. We think it's, Arthur Smith is burying him on the bench. He's just blocking all the time, doing all this. He's actually out there performing. It's just the fact the QB play was bad. So I don't know if that takes a step forward or not. I have to think that Desmond Ridder won't be as bad as he was last year if that's the guy that they hand the keys to.
So that's what I was going to bring up is how much does the quarterback play into that?
You got to think he's going to be better, right? You would think that a guy who you hope, or better yet, I mean, Atlanta could just be playing their cards pretty close to the vest. Like I know they said that they're not in on the Lamar Jackson thing. Doesn't mean that they're not in on a rookie. Doesn't mean that they're not in on possibly a trade for another quarterback. Like Trey Lance is one of those guys who's just floating out there where maybe he's kind of run his course in San Fran and Atlanta swoops in and they grab him, which would be a great fit for the Arthur Smith offense. Like him throwing to Kyle Pitts and Drake London would make me very, very happy.
Well, Austin as a Falcons fan, it would be a great fit for his dreams to come true. I'm pretty sure.
Right.
Oh yes. Yes.
The point is, I think Kyle Pitts still needs to be talked about at the elite tight end. It's like Travis Kelce, a big tier gap. And then the next guys you want to talk about are going to be Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts for me. And where you take them, I don't know. Generally, unless it's like a super tight end premium or start 2 tight end league, like I'm not really thinking about these guys in the 3rd round. I'm probably not thinking about the guys in the 4th round. I'm generally just find some dumpsters at tight end later in the draft. But I do see the reason why somebody would take him at the 3-1. Like I think it's a fair spot for him.
Yeah, Joe chimes in that maybe saying he's run his course before he's even started the race might not be the best take on that. I'm going to have you keep talking about another tight end, Michael, because he plays for your favorite team. Dallas Goedert in I scrolled away from that, whatever round he went in, the 6th round. 6th round, but as the 4th tight end off the board, 5th. Travis Kelce's not on the screen, Andrew, so 6th. Regardless, middle round tight end, middle round tight ends are a trap in redraft. We've talked about that for years. Goddard is 28 years old, but tied to one of the best young quarterbacks in fantasy football, one of the best young quarterbacks in football. You mentioned you're going to be skipping these guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Is Goddard a guy in the 6th that brings any interest to you, especially as an Eagles fan?
No, okay. None. I mean, this is littered with Eagles tight ends and Iowa tight ends, right? Like all the Iowa stuff behind me. We got TJ Hockenson, we got Noah Fant, we got George Kittle. The middle round tight end. Like I love those guys as players, but I want no part of them in Dynasty. I want no part of them in redraft. Those middle round tight ends, hard pass for me. I'll just take the value at running back, wide receiver, the other positions. Superflex league, you're going to get some nice quarterbacks in those rounds. I don't want the tight end. I mean, it has to be a crazy tight end premium, like 1.5 bonus on top of 1. So tight ends are getting 2.5 points per catch to make me really want to draft those guys. Otherwise, they're just traps, man. For me, it's Travis Kelce or bust anymore when I do a dynasty startup. Yeah. And if I bust out, I'm just going to take 4 or 5 of these guys in the round 12, 13, 14, 15 plus. Like the ones you're trying to hit on, I'm trying to hit the Evan Ingrams of last year, the Jawan Johnsons, maybe you get one of those rookies like a Cade Otton, Daniel Bellinger, like one of those kind of guys where you just, hey, I've tripled my money because I took this guy in the 17th round of a startup.
Yeah.
While they're producing similarly to like these guys that it's not they're going to produce the entire year similarly, but they're going to do it in spurts where you can start and you can extract the most amount of value out of them as like a Dallas Goedert, TJ Hockenson, George Kittle, these mid-round tight ends, Pat Freiermuth. They just do feel like traps to me.
So, Austin, I'm going to have you continue with the tight ends, and we'll probably move away from tight end. But TJ Hockenson is interesting to me in Dynasty to put in with this group because he is only 25 years old and now has 2 top 5 seasons to his name already in this young career of his. So, do you feel the same way? Are you avoiding middle round tight ends? Obviously, in this draft, you took Kelsey, so it's a moot point. But in general, in Dynasty, are you avoiding middle and just stacking up at the end? And does TJ Hockenson deserve a little bit more respect?
I think, yes, I am avoiding the middle round tight ends, but I disagree that TJ Hockenson is a middle round tight end. I think he got taken out of value in this draft. Like, to your point, he's 25 and he has had 2 elite tight end seasons, and he was a featured part of the Vikings offense last year. I don't see why that would change. Last year was the first year the Vikings implemented their new offense where they were doing a lot more 11 personnel, had TJ Hockenson as a featured receiver. I don't see why they don't build on that going into this year and potentially enhance that offense. So I really like TJ Hockenson. I think he's taken out of value. I'm more out on the George Kittle, Dallas Goedert tier because George Kittle, I love him as a football player. As a fantasy player, he's so boomer bust. Like last season, he lost people week after week after week. And then if you somehow squeaked into the playoffs with him, he helped you out then. But
Yeah,
if you had him, if he was your number 1 tight end, your only tight end option, like he probably didn't get you to the playoffs last year. Dallas Goedert, I don't think the ceiling is there to really warrant that pick. So I would rather wait, get a Pat Freiermuth type, or I mean, I even love where Darren Waller's going in this draft. So yeah, I would skip out on that middle tight end tier as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is a good time for me to remind folks that in a dynasty draft, you are going to do far, far more than 15 rounds. We try to keep the show to an hour, and we're really already running up against it. So we try to keep the show to an hour, so we stop after round 15. You're typically, if you've never played Dynasty before, you are drafting 20 to 25 people on your roster, and that's your team. If you've never played Dynasty before, I urge you guys to just go out on Twitter, follow people like Mike, ask us questions. We're going to be way more able to help you with specific instances. We can talk in generalities all we want. Mike, before we kind of get into the end of the draft stuff, this is something we talked about the very first time we did a startup draft that I wanted to let you chime in on and give your opinion on. One of the things you cannot simulate in a mock draft is all of the trades that tend to happen in a startup. And so with this, you're just kind of stuck where you are. It almost, I never want to call a mock draft boring, but compared to a real startup draft, it gets a little boring because you're learning a lot about ADP, but you're not learning a lot about what you're willing to do and not willing to do when it comes to these trades. So are you someone who, let's just start with, are you someone who looks to trade up or trade back? Is that how do you approach startups when it comes to the trades?
So I only play in Superflex leagues. So the one QB people can just, you have fun with that. You have fun with your one QB. So all my advice is just based off Superflex. And the first thing I always try to do, Ryan, is to trade up into the first round to grab 2 elite quarterbacks. Like I want 2 of those guys in the top 9. I go to 9. Some people only go to 8 or 7. But the point is, like up to like Deshaun Watson and above, I want 2 of those guys. For me, just about anything I do, whether it's lineup or best ball becomes a little bit more tricky because all your depth comes into play, and the amount that I'm willing to send is very different. But traditionally, I'm going to everybody, and I'll give you my second and third for your first and fifth, and that's where I start. And if I get any pick on top of their first rounder, any pick, I don't care if it's the 7th, their 9th, their 15th, their 16th, like it's a win. If anytime I can trade my second, third, just straight up for somebody's first, that's going to land me another quarterback in the top 8, top 9, I do it every single time. So that is always the first move. So when we sit down and we do a mock draft here, I'm looking at the pick selections and I'm going, well, usually around like 9 or 10, you can get 2 quarterbacks in the top 12 and you don't have to trade up for them. So that was the big strategy where you just sit down here. When I'm looking at this mock draft, I go, I don't have to make a trade. It's not the worst spot to be in if you find yourself in a startup and you're picking 10, you're picking 11, and you know people are going to take Chase or Jefferson or Bijan or Travis Kelce ahead of you, because you're one of the only people that's going to be able to get 2 top 12 quarterbacks and not have to actually pay up for them, not have to trade your second, third round selections to go get them.
I love that. And that's what I was going to point out is there's still value to these mocks because it's learning where people go. And, Austin, you pointed out, you've seen Pacheco go as early as the 6th round. You've seen him now go in the 8th round and you feel more comfortable with him in the 8th. But what it also tells you is if you're able to grab a guy like Isaiah Pacheco in the 9th, there's going to be people out there who might value him way higher than that. And that's going to give you an idea of their value. Austin, you mentioned last time that you're pretty trade averse when it comes to startups. I guess my question to you is does there come a point where you start looking for specific players and you're like, if I was on the board right now, I would take this person? And is that when you'll start looking for your trades?
Yes. So I think first off, ditto to everything Mike just said. If I were starting in the 112 in a real startup, I would be trying to trade up to try and get an elite quarterback. And then beyond that, it comes down to, is there a player that I'm like, okay, he has fallen too far. I have to get this guy. And I am willing to make some moves to get there. And that is often when I would trade up. This can get really fun and funky because you're not the only one that has a guy that they are like trying to get with their next pick. So the earlier you can kind of plan ahead to figure out when you're going to want an extra pick, the better. Because once somebody's on the board, if there's a guy that they like, they're going to take him. And you're not going to be able to make that trade. So it really it depends on the situation. It depends on my draft slot and how my roster build is going. But, I'm starting to experiment more with doing trades in a startup. Yeah. It is challenging. And I think because the way you value different picks in different rounds can be really tough. I think the standard one that Mike called out where you trade a 1st and a 5th for a 2nd and a 3rd, I've seen that happen a lot. But it gets really complicated to value the difference between an extra 11th round pick and a 15th round pick. Like it starts to get really subjective, and it's kind of like vibes at that point of how different people feel about the depth at certain positions.
Yeah, I really like that take on it. Is you're competing with the other people too, because I have this great story. Julia Pathworth from the Fantasy Footballers. I was in a rookie draft with her last year, and I'm sending her DM after DM trying to get this pick, and she's like, I have a feeling you might be trading up to take my guy from me. And like, it's that thing where like, you're hoping your guy falls. And then she's like, does his name rhyme with Malil Shakir? And I was like, yes, it does rhyme with that. And so I was like, if you want Shakir, you better take him now because that's what I'm trying to trade up to get. So at least I forced her to take him versus letting him fall longer. But just interesting things like that where you're competing, but you might even be competing with the person you're trying to trade up to where they're like, no, that's my guy as well. I teased this a little bit before the show. So again, standard draft etiquette is you don't talk about players who haven't been drafted yet. We are coming up on the 14th round. We're coming up to the end of the show. Mike, I'm going to let you go first here. Are there players that you're just absolutely shocked are still not on someone's roster in a dynasty startup available in the pool right now?
Yeah, we're doing a startup. We're 2 weeks out from the NFL draft. Yeah. 2 weeks out, and how many of these rookies, like these 2nd round rookies too? I'm not even talking 3rd, 4th rounders. These deep dart throws. The 2nd round guys are still available, just hanging out. And nobody. We're doing a startup where everybody thinks about youth, and we get excited about.
Well, and when you look at some of the youth picks that have happened in this draft, it's not what you would have necessarily expected.
Right, right. So there are a ton of rookies that are just floating out here. We're in the 13th round, man, coming up on the 14th, and I'm going, wow, these guys are still available. When you're talking about traditional startups, I always tell people, I talk to the patrons, I said, generally for me, if you just kind of look at the 7th round and you put that as generic, like 1st round rookie value, you'll find a lot of guys who go 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and your rookie drafts are going to end up in the 7th, 8th round going forward. So if we think about we're 5 rounds later than that, and we got some guys who are going in rookie drafts at the 203, 204, 205, still hanging out on the board, that's very interesting to me that these guys are still here.
Austin, anybody jumping off at you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree on the take with some of the rookie receivers and just rookie players that are still on the board. One thing I know people are really down on Kayshon Boutte, but the fact that he is like still available to me, that's one that's kind of wild. Yeah. Like, I feel like the upside is there with him. I think Chase Claypool is an interesting one to me. Like, he has just fallen off a cliff in people's eyes, and like everybody has been making fun of the Chicago Bears for making the trade for him, but like, I am of the mind that when NFL teams make moves for players, you should pay attention to that. I don't think that the Chicago Bears are like, oh, we're going to trade the 33rd pick in the NFL draft just to sit this guy and not do anything with him. Like, he also is going to be in an offense where DJ Moore is the number one, and so he's going to have an opportunity to be a number two. Like when the trade was made, people were like, "Oh, Chase Claypool, he's not a number one receiver. He doesn't have to be." There's DJ Moore, there's Darnell Mooney, and there's Chase Claypool. Like I think he has the chance to have some upside. And then the last one to me, and I'll say this every week. I know people are like, there's different opinions on where he's going to be, but like KJ Osborne. Why is he in the 13th round? Why is he available? I'm like, unless he gets taken in this next pick, I'm not afraid to say it. I'm taking it. Like
he's on your next pick. Yeah.
There we go. KJ Osborne. He's my next pick. Like, I don't understand why he's falling so much. He's the number 2 receiver unless the Vikings draft another quarterback or another receiver in this draft. And if they do, so be it.
I'm going to scroll up here, guys. We are hitting the 1 hour mark. I want to quickly give Austin and Mike a little time to talk about their team. There is one pick I'm going to give a hard time as well. Not about your teams, but there is a pick out there that's going to get the oops of the draft. But Mike, let's just start with your team. So did you have a strategy? Obviously, landing 2 top 12 quarterbacks.
2 quarterbacks.
But, yeah. Did you have a strategy? And were there any snipes or anything that forced you to change or happy surprises in the draft?
Oh, there were snipes all over the place. This draft is full of snipers.
Yeah.
Dodging bullets out here left and right. I don't know how many times like I'm sitting there and I'm going, man, I'm going to take Mac Jones as my QB4. This would be awesome. In a normal league, I love to have 4 QBs just so I can have that flexibility to trade one of them away. He goes, I'm going, damn. All right, can't take Mac Jones.
I'm going to stop you right now because I promise you, unscripted, that's my oops of the draft, but not for a good reason like yours.
Oh, come on, man.
How are we taking Mac Oh, my God.
I got sniped on the
definitely
oops.
been, well, actually, as your 4th quarterback, you would not have been. But you know what? Let's just dive into it here. So B. Brendan, all love my friend. Bryce Young is his 1st quarterback. Mac Jones and Brock Purdy as his 2nd and 3rd quarterback. This guy might not be competing for 3-4 years in this, and these guys might not be his quarterbacks. Mac Jones literally might not have a job when this is all said and done. So if you took him as your 4th quarterback, I guess I'm okay with it. But as your 2nd, when you have a rookie that's not on our roster right now, and all love for Bryce Young, I think he's going to be absolutely fine. But this was an interesting set of picks for me. So unscripted, that was my oops of the draft. Sorry, Brendan. Do better next time. Yeah, Mike almost saved me on the oops. Yeah, I was going to say Mike almost saved him.
Could have been awesome. Could have the oops and got Mac Jones. Would have been great. No, generally just for this, just taking whoever. Trying to stay away from running backs. Definitely leaning into the 0 RB approach.
So did not take your first running back until the 9th round, almost the end of the 9th round.
Which is crazy, man. If 2022 me would see me now, he'd kick my ass. Like he'd be like, "What are you doing, man? RBs are the thing. It's half PPR." No, I've really leaned into the flexibility of wide receivers. Take some youthful ones with some older ones. Don't really worry about the age too much, and then running backs just become such a value, right? Like I like Aaron Jones. He could still have a really good year. He could still really produce numbers. Antonio Gibson, kind of the same thing. Everybody hates Antonio Gibson now. I mean, Brian Robinson went 1 pick before him, and I go, that's crazy to me. Brian Robinson doesn't do anything but run for 3 yards and fall down. So a guy like Antonio Gibson, let me just throw him in there. And then
pardon my issues with not being able to get this damn player card thing to go away. What is happening?
I don't know.
There we go. Oh, yeah, I just got to click it again. I'm an asshole.
Roshan Johnson, that's just a love pick, man. That's just a guy that I'm taking a shot on, that the NFL loves him as much as I do. So, and then we had to get a tight end at some point. So why not one tied to Josh Allen? Like that's like a decent choice.
And I'm glad you had brought up earlier in the draft that you're avoiding the mid-round guys, and this kind of shows you. And you hit a note that I'm literally going to be writing an article about when we get off this group chat. Is I'm literally writing about you need to load up on tight ends at the end of your draft because there's not the streaming pool you're used to when you do redraft leagues. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, tight end and on the way back here, just a spoiler, it'll probably be another tight end.
I love it, and that's what it should be.
Probably where it's going to be. And then if with this draft went on for another 3 rounds, it'd probably be 3 more tight ends.
Exactly, and I love that because that's what this is about, is understanding that strategy that if you're not going to take tight end early, you better take a lot of tight ends late. Speaking of someone who did take tight end early, Austin, walk us through it.
Yeah. So first off, if you watched the show last week, I also took the 112 and I struggled from it. So I wanted to try it again and see if I could do better. Yeah. Because 112, you're not getting an elite quarterback. You're on the edge and you've got to kind of figure out if you're going to trade up or if you're going to just go a kind of zig while everyone's zagging so you can try and get some other positional advantage. And that's what I did. I kind of wanted to see how long could I wait on quarterback and still feel comfortable. So I decided, let me take who I think are the best tight end and running back right now, because I think those are the shallowest positions. And then I decided, yeah, I don't think Daniel Jones is going to come back to me in the next turn. So I went with him. I decided to go against my typical pathway and was like, you know what? I'm going to take a veteran receiver that's older. I'm going to take Cooper Kupp just because the talent is there and he's in the 4th round. So why not? And then from there, I was like, okay, let me build some depth. And I love my receiving core and I love my running back core. Like having 3 fairly young running backs that have top 25 upside, I feel really good about. And then I loved just waiting and waiting and waiting for my backup tight end and finding a young player that might pop in the future. And so Isaiah likely is that candidate for me. So I feel pretty satisfied with this overall. I will say, I don't know what's happening with my sleeper on my computer right now. It's like 10 seconds behind whatever's on the screen. And
well, and I find that interesting too, because Michael Scully said he was timing out. So I wonder if that's just happening with sleeper right now. So
yeah, so I don't know what's going on over here. And that explains some of the stress behind my picks.
I saw you getting close to getting timed out on a ton of picks. So
but and then lastly, I got the Kenny Pickett, George Pickens stack, which
yeah,
I'm a fan of. Like if Pittsburgh will beef up that offensive line this year, like Kenny Pickett did solid as a rookie, as far as rookie quarterbacks go, particularly like from last year's quarterback.
Well, I was
class,
gonna say the 5th round for the number 1 quarterback taken last year.
Right. So I feel pretty good about it. We'll see how it turns out over the season, but all in all, I feel way better about this draft than I did last week's.
There you go. And that's what mock drafting is all about, is feeling better about your draft, feeling better about drafting in general. Michael, first and foremost, thank you for joining us. Josh pointed out earlier, thank God we had you on for a Superflex draft. Who knows how bad this would have went if it wasn't Superflex. Since,
I try my best. I try my best at 1 QB. I try my best. But it was funny that I come on and Josh is out here breaking Eagles news like to start this show. Like,
exactly.
What are the odds of that Jalen Hurts gets?
Well, it was all serendipitous. Contract? Austin got to talk about Kyle Pitts and the Falcons. I was able to kick to you for Dallas Goedert. Wow. Like it worked out the way it was supposed to work out. Once again, Michael, tell people where they can find you. Tell them what you're working on.
You can find me on Twitter at Iowa Michael. I don't know why you would follow me on Twitter. It's probably a recipe for disaster. But
I meant to make that joke earlier that I know better than to tell people to follow you on Twitter at this point. So.
if you'd like to, go ahead. Pretty good at trolling, pretty good at just shit posting, and it's a bunch of junk most of the time. Like me complaining the fact that it was 82 degrees here on Friday and there's 2 feet of snow out there today. Like, I don't get this. What's going on? But go to South Harmon Fantasy Football on YouTube. You can find a lot of our stuff there, and then check us out for every Friday. 40 Chess podcast, the OG that started it all on Destination Devy. You can find us there.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I have the YouTube and your Patreon linked in the description of this video after I go in. Austin, tell the people bye.
Yeah. Had fun today. Catch me on Twitter and Instagram at Austin_FFL, and all of my writing at clubfantasy.com.
Perfect. As always, guys, you can find us live every Wednesday night, though I think last Wednesday we weren't live. I think we pre-recorded the show, but most Wednesday nights you can find us live. This week, and Josh will correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we have Jeff Bell from Football Guys. We just had his 2 co-hosts on last week to talk wide receivers. We're going to be talking fantasy tight ends, rookie incoming tight ends in our last of our Stars of Tomorrow series as we get closer to the NFL draft. So we'll be talking tight ends with Jeff Bell. Don't forget, we don't just cover football. We have our golf DFS show with Kelly Singh, one of the best golf shows in the industry. If you're looking to make some money on DFS golf, if you are that big of a degenerate, make sure you are watching the show with Kelly and Adam. They give some of the best picks every single Tuesday. This show's back every single Monday. It's a new kind of draft every single Monday. As I mentioned, we're focusing a lot on Dynasty and Rookie. We're probably going to lean very heavily into Rookie over these next couple weeks because I like to do rookie drafts before the NFL draft and then see how the NFL draft changes those picks. So we'll be back again next Monday. If you're an analyst and you want to guest with us, shoot me a DM. The schedule is pretty wide open. If you just like to draft, make sure you're following us. I put the draft out on our Twitter page every single Monday at 9:00. And if you were in this current draft, I'm going to send you a friend request so you'll get that even sooner just to make sure these drafts fill up. So I want to thank every single person who drafted with us. I want to thank Mike. I want to thank Austin and everybody who tuned in for the show. Always remember that defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We'll see you for next week's mock on Monday.